Morena e te whare, no mai haere mai. Good morning and welcome everybody to this Infrastructure and Environment Committee meeting of 7th of February 2024. I'd like to welcome you all here today in the Council chambers, and I'd like to welcome those that are joining us via live stream as well. Can I just ask the councillors please turn off their phones, and we will be looking to have a break around 11 a.m. this morning. I'd like to ask Mayor Tapsell to open us with a karakia, please.
Morena koutou. Tūtawa mai I runga, tūtawa mai I raro, tūtawa mai I roto, tūtawa mai I waho. Kia tau wai, te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tai.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. I'd like now to call for apologies, please. I have, yes, Councillor Kaiwhanga.
Apology for lateness for Councillor Patterson.
Any other apologies? No, I'd like to have a mover and a seconder that the apologies for lateness for Councillor Patter, that's Councillor Waru and Councillor O'Brien. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? There appear to be none. Are there any urgent items that are not on the agenda this morning? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. You're not Your Worship.
She'll take it, she'll take it.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor.
In October 2023, the Ombudsman released a report that was critical of this council. In the first sentence, he said that the perceptions expressed by council staff and members of the public during the course of my investigation leave me deeply concerned about the council's commitment to conducting its business in openness and transparency. On the 2nd of November, a Ngāti Whakaui Gifted Reserves Protocol Committee was held in secret.
Councillor Lee.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Relevance.
This is not an urgent item at this stage.
I would have thought the reputation of council was pretty important and urgent.
It absolutely is, but this is not the place to discuss this at the moment. Thank you.
Madam Chair, you mentioned last meeting that we would have an opportunity to talk about the interpretation of the standing orders. When is that going to happen?
This is not the forum to do that, and it's not actually an urgent item for this agenda. We could discuss that another time, but at this stage we'll leave that as not being an urgent item today. Thank you. Okay,
one further item on the coming up in the minutes. We see that the interim chief executive at the last meeting recommended that the petitioner Terry Hammond, who was declined an opportunity to present his petition, seeks a meeting with councillors or invite them to a meeting on this topic. Can you give us and the community an update on where we're at with that?
I can give a bit of an update and then I will ask.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, I think, urgent items should be taken very seriously. Urgent items are items that we must deal with now. We can't wait until the appropriate or a further meeting to be able to discuss it. None of what I've heard this morning are urgent items. They could have been raised with all of us beforehand. So perhaps if we could just focus on what would actually be an urgent item. I wouldn't want this to become an opportunity for people to just raise their personal issues.
Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. I take on board your feedback, and I will ask that we stop this conversation now and we have those conversations elsewhere. This is not an urgent item. Thank you, Councillor Lee.
I request a right of reply to Her Worship.
Excuse me, Councillor Lee. When I make a ruling on an urgent item, then that's my ruling, and we move on. Thank you. Just like now to move on to the next item on our agenda, please. That's item number 5, the confirmation of minutes. This is the minutes of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee meeting held on the 12th of December 2023. Could I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the committee meeting held on the 12th of December be confirmed as a true and correct record? Councillor Brown and Councillor Kiriopa. Are there any matters for correction?
The typo in 5.1 should be ratepayers.
Councillor Kaiwhanga has raised that 5.1, there's a bit of a typo there. We'll correct that. Any other points for correction?
Madam Chair, yes.
Yes.
Can I just ask for some clarity? Was the petition, which is listed in item 4.2 here, outside of the terms of reference of this committee, or is it outside the terms of reference of council?
This is not a place to where you debate the items from the minutes. This is actually a place where we check for correction and pass the minutes.
Was this? Yeah, I am trying to correct the minutes if it's necessary, because my understanding is that this was ruled previously as outside the terms of reference of council as opposed to this committee.
Madam Chair, they've been moved and seconded.
Yes, thank you. I've just had clarification on what this situation was, and it clearly reflects what was said at the last meeting and how the item was not to be a subject that could be dealt with in that committee, and that this is accurately reflected in the minutes, and this is just an exercise to clarify and pass the minutes. And so I'd like to now ask...
So does that mean it's within the scope of council, but not this committee?
That's not an argument or a discussion to be had now. This is the minutes. They're reflecting what happened at that meeting at the time. So I'd just like to move on now, please, Councillor Lee, and ask that this motion to pass these minutes as a true and correct record of the meeting be accepted. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against? Carried. Thank you. Item number 6 is our presentation this morning, and with us today we have David from Waka Kotahi, and Stavros would like to introduce and give a précis to the report to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morena Tatu Katoa, good morning. I would like to, I've got the pleasure to introduce David Spears. He's the Regional Director from Waka Kotahi NZTA. I would like to preface the presentation that David will undertake for elected members, that those programs of works are captured by the activities of NZTA in our area are really sort of the outcome of work that we've been working with NZTA for a number of years now, especially since the lifting of the Rotorua Eastern Arterial route in 2016. In 2016, an agreement was reached between the Rotorua Lakes Council and NZTA, that REA designation that was in place since the early 1960s, this was no longer feasible. And we have agreed to work in partnership to continue to improve the two main state highway corridors that serve Rotorua at the local level, because all our residential and commercial activity is situated on either side of those corridors, the south to the north, State Highway 5, and the south to the east, State Highway 30. Those are important corridors for us, and within that scope of undertaking and partnership we have agreed with NZTA, Waka Kotahi, it was that a strategic outcome called Connect Rotorua was to be developed, and will continue to improve those two corridors to enable both our residential growth, our commercial growth, our industrial growth, and especially since those corridors serve as key nodes for freight movement and visitor movement into Rotorua. So David's presentation today aims to outline a whole range of programs of work that's been undertaken within that partnership agreement, and also focus or anticipate future works as they come in the new National Land Transport Programme that is going to be considered by the government in the near future. So to that effect, I welcome David and let him progress with his presentation, and I'm sure between us we can respond to any questions. Thank you.
Actually, just before you start, David, welcome, by the way. We also have Jessica Andrews from Waka Kotahi on Zoom with us this morning. Good morning, Jess.
Good morning. The sound quality here isn't very good, so if I miss something, please just repeat to make sure you get my attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you, David.
Kia ora koutou. Ko David Spears tōku ingoa. Pretty much hand the presentation over to Stavros after that introduction. Far out. Look, it's nice to be here. Thank you for having us. As Stavros said, the purpose of this presentation, as much as anything, is a little bit of a reflection on the 3 years of NLTP investment and work that has almost finished, and a look at what we have proposed for the upcoming NLTP 24 to 27 in terms of investment priorities. As Stavros rightly pointed out, very much focused on connecting Rotorua and on State Highway 5, State Highway 30. It's not unusual in New Zealand for the State Highway network to be or to become the internal roadway, I suppose, for district councils and settlements. But one of the things we've learned, particularly I think from Hamilton City, is we need to manage that very, very carefully, or we end up in a situation where essentially that function becomes very confused and very difficult to manage. So I think we've done that, and I think we're doing that here, and hopefully the plans we have going forward continue to make that progress. I'm really happy to take questions as we go, if you like, or at the end. Jess will answer most of them. And we'll just kick through the presentation. Do I drive it? I suppose I drive it.
Yes, there's that. And maybe we might just reserve the questions till the end, if that's okay, David?
Oh, yeah, catch point.
Yeah, yep. Thank you.
So, yeah, as I've just said, what we'll cover today, a bit of a recap on what we've already done in 21-24, the GPS government policy statement, to the extent that we are able to comment on that. We'll give you some insights into the State Highway investment proposal and just a bit of a update on current projects and construction. So the 21-24 program has been in Rotorua substantial, well over $100 million of investment, either completed or very nearly completed through that 10-year period, which is why I think we've had some criticism that it has felt like the city of road cones for quite a while, and that's, you know, to some extent a fair reflection of the fact that there's been an awful lot of work going on. For those people that have felt the effect of that, hopefully in the State Highway Improvement Plan we've got bad news for them, because there'll be some more road cones. But I think in the interests of really, really good progress. So State Highway 30 Eastern Corridor Stage 1, we've completed that in 2022, $23 million investment. State Highway 30 Stage 2, very nearly completed, again a $35 million investment from Crown Infrastructure Partners. Tenai Junction to Pangaroa safety improvements, very nearly completed again, and the road cones will disappear from there relatively soon. Another $34 million. You can read the list, I don't need to read it for you, but it's suffice to say that it's been substantial, and I think the council and ourselves have worked really, really well in managing the impacts of that, but also, you know, the messaging to the community. Generally, I think it's been pretty well received. There's the map of Rotorua. I like maps because you can actually see the sort of scale of the impact when you have a look at them. And look, the one thing in the program that we wanted to achieve that we haven't achieved is State Highway 30A, the central corridor. We have put that forward in the State Highway Improvement Plan for the next round of funding as a priority, along with quite a few, with the remainder of State Highway 30 and quite a few investment proposals for low cost, low risk. But that's our big priority, is to progress 30A, because it's the one thing that we wanted to achieve, and because we didn't get funding, we haven't been able to progress that. In terms of preparing for 24-27, as you'll be aware, we are waiting for the government policy statement, as have everyone else, as part of their as part of its 100-day plan. Government made a commitment to change the GPS. It's the principal steering document to which we give effect when we make our State Highway Improvement Program, etc. So At the moment, the Ministry of Transport is supporting the Minister on developing that GPS. We're anticipating the next draft in March. We don't know when in March, but we're anticipating that it will be relatively soon based on the feedback we're getting from the Ministry at the moment. Yeah, what we know is there will be quite a bit of change in that GPS. What we don't know is the significance of that change, where that change will occur. But what we will have to do is, once we receive that, we will revise the draft investment prioritisation method. So that's the method by which we look at future investments and essentially decide which ones will give effect to the GPS or not. And clearly, that will need some revision once we've got the GPS in place. We will also need to revise the State Highway Investment Proposal, and which is why in the next few slides, when I put up for you what we've put forward in the State Highway Investment Proposal, it's indicative. It's very indicative until we have got a GPS. That said, we continue to work on the Regional Land Transport Plan. We continue to work with the Regional Transport Committee on that plan because that doesn't need to change dramatically unless the GPS makes a radical shift, because that plan only has to be consistent with the GPS. It doesn't have to give effect to it. It is the statement of what district councils want to prioritise in the transport sector. It's not our plan, and I think that's a really, really important distinction between the State Highway Improvement Plan, which is our plan, and the Regional Land Transport Plan, which is our road controlling authority partners' plan. It's what their priorities are. And so we continue to work on that, and with a sort of one eye on the GPS and one eye on what developments our partners want to see. So we'll share updates as soon as we can through our normal channels, and you'll know relatively soon after we know. Jess, chip in if you think there's anything to add, and no, she's shaking her head. So the state highway activities that we have proposed in the State Highway Improvement Plan are up there on the screen. From a strategic investment point of view, State Highway 29, this is for the whole Bay of Plenty. Tauriko network connections. Tauriko is a really important corridor on State Highway 29 for us. It's a thorn in everybody's side in terms of congestion at the moment. We're just about to start the enabling works there, which will put signalisation and change the shape of the intersection with Cambridge Road on State Highway 29. We're also starting work on State Highway 29A, which is the passenger transport corridor, and looking at what ultimately a State Highway 29 bypass might look like into the future. That's a substantial piece of work. Jess's team are leading that at the moment. In the meantime, we'll get the enabling works in place, and what those enabling works are designed to do is free up some housing capacity and some development capacity for Tauranga. Combined passenger transport services, infrastructure investment, still a priority in spite of perhaps what everybody thinks. Passenger transport services remain a significant part of our investment and a significant priority for us going forward. And there's a list there of all of the sites that we're proposing, in particular for yourselves. State Highway 30A, Urban Revitalisation, Connect Rotorua program. As I said, that is one of our priorities because we haven't been able to deliver that thus yet. In terms of speed and infrastructure activities, again, in spite of what you hear, speed management and infrastructure to manage safety on our state highway networks is still an incredibly important part of our investment across the region. This region is second only to the Waikato region in terms of deaths and serious injuries on our roads. The cost of that is phenomenal to the country, not only from a social point of view, but also bluntly from a financial point of view. So it is a very, very high priority for us, and you'll continue to see investment in median barriers and road corridor improvements and speed management to manage the impact of that. And finally, in yellow, incredibly hard to read, is the proposed maintenance program, and I'll give you a little bit of insight into that in a minute. But again, we're currently in catch-up mode after the events of a year ago, where what we had planned was the single biggest maintenance and operations program ever on our roads. Obviously, that got hijacked by some pretty significant weather events. We've made a commitment to continue that work and deliver the biggest program ever in the coming 3-year program. So when I said get used to road cones, I meant it. It is going to be a very large program of maintenance and operations. We don't really have a choice because the network is under massive pressure. We have got, the same issues we had before the cyclones. They haven't gone away. If anything, they've gotten worse. And we're really conscious that in many cases, the disruption of those delays can be quite significant. So we're working pretty hard to manage those as best we can. Apologies for that. Low cost, low risk. So we don't know how big the low cost, low risk allocation for funding will be, but this is the stuff we just get on and do. It's the less than $2 million investments, tend to be relatively small, but can be quite impactful. What we've proposed for the low cost, low risk program for your district is State Highway 5 Old Taupo Road, so improved crossing facilities. As Stavros said, it's a significant corridor for Rotorua, particularly in terms of pedestrians and cyclists and safety. Nongataha Village, so improved connectivity for local residents between the residential areas and local shops and cafes, and again for commuters cycling into Rotorua. One of the things we're conscious of with Rotorua is this is a really great example of pedestrian and cyclists commuting in and out of the town and around the town. So that investment's pretty significant. State Highway 30, 10 Irish Road shared path, again, safety for, in this case, for the schools principally, but again, walking and cycling. And State Highway 30, Sala Street, and that's around safer crossing facilities to reduce that severance issue that you're experiencing at the moment, where you can sort of stand there for a while thinking, how do I get to the other side of the road? So assuming we get a similar level of low-cost, low-risk investment through the coming investment portfolio, those things should go through. So fingers crossed. And again, we'll let you know when we can. Projects in construction. So by way of an update, as you know, State Highway 30, Eastern Corridor, we took a 3-phased approach to improvements. The idea being that while we were doing phase 1, actually doing the implementation, we were planning and seeking funding for stage 2, and while we're implementing stage 2, we're now seeking funding for the remainder of stage 3. So for phase 1, which is most of Isles Road to Wharenui Road, we're having an interesting time with the presentation. That is almost complete and should be complete by middle of this year. Did I do that? So the focus there is on improving access to the Wharenui Road area. It's $35 million. As you know, it's Crown Infrastructure Partners funding, and we're the delivery agent. Phase 2, which is Ōwhata Road to the airport, and part of phase 3, 4-laning Paisley Road to Brent Road, that'll be constructed as growth and development demands. Now I know that, let's skip to, that will include shared path on-road cycle lane from Miles Road to Wharenui Road. It includes quite a lot of safety improvement, pedestrian crossing, bus stops, etc. And I know you guys are taking the opportunity to put new water mains in as part of that process. I'll just go off my notes. I will talk about State Highway 30 Eastern Corridor Stage 2, the Eastgate intersection, because I know that that's an issue, and I know it's been an issue for quite a while, and Stavros and I have been talking about this a little bit. The detailed business case for that work recommended that the best outcome for that intersection, there we are, was a roundabout. Now, the issue with the roundabout is it's a very expensive intervention. It's not required yet. And so very difficult for us to justify in terms of funding. So we're unlikely to get funding for a roundabout there in the current upcoming NLTP process. Probably unlikely to get funding in the one after that either. and maybe in the one after that. So it's quite a long time before we would be putting a roundabout into that area. We know that there are issues in terms of growth, and there are pressures coming in terms of growth. And Jess and I have been talking with the planning team, even in the last couple of days, about what does a logical solution look like to this in this intersection. One of the things that we are anxious to do, and this is a reflection on, I guess, the learnings from Hamilton City, is avoid the situation where we have lots of individual access ways onto a state highway, because it ceases to function as a state highway very, very quickly when you have that. And instead concentrate those kind of feeder roads behind the state highway into one or two significant intersections. And this would be one of those, and hence the recommendation that a roundabout is the optimum solution. We also know that in the meantime, you have some desires around putting in an alternative to the situation that's there at the moment to make it safer and more efficient, and that looks like traffic lights. Our team at the moment are looking at what justifications are there for putting traffic lights into that state highway environment? Are they safe? And if they were put in, what would their lifespan be, etc. I've asked the team to have a really good look at being pragmatic about the approach to this, and we'll work with Stavros and his team over the next few weeks to hopefully come to a good place in terms of what can and can't be implemented into that state highway network. It does create some challenges. It's a little unusual to have traffic lights in the middle of a state highway in that environment. I know further towards Rotorua there are a lot of traffic lights. We might have to make some modifications for that to happen. The answer may still be no, but at least we'll understand why. So we'll work with Stavros and team to make sure that we've got a really rational and pragmatic consideration of that intersection. State Highway 33 Tenai Junction to Paengaroa safety improvements. So the final section of those improvements are underway. Again, project's expected to be finished mid-2024. It's been quite a big piece of work, widening the centre line, flexible medium barriers on short sections, the rumble strips. I'm sure everyone will be very relieved when it's finished, but it has and will make that piece of the network much, much safer, which for obvious reasons is our concern. And finally, just a view of the maintenance and operation. Pull the base, not just the surface of the road, but the actual supporting underlayer, the pavement we call it, and renew the whole lot. And that's a piece of work that has to be done when the road reaches the end of life. And as you'll be aware, many of our roads are reaching the end of their kind of useful life at the moment, which is why we end up with the pothole problem that we've got. We've made really, really good progress on that across the network, and you'll continue to see that. And long may this long, hot summer last, because it means we will really be able to make good inroads. We've done quite a few emergency works, and they're still going, even a year later. Some of those will be ongoing for quite some time because they're quite large slip areas. They will take an awful lot of work to stabilise and to prevent future issues. The underslips, like Rotorua, are the worst ones because with an overslip, a bunch of stuff comes down, blocks the road, you push it out of the way and you do some work to stabilise, the land above. And that sounds simple, it's not. But you've still got a road. With an underslip, when it slides away and takes the whole road, that's much, much more significant, and it's a much more difficult proposition. You end up rebuilding entire sections of the road, which is why it's taking quite a long time. What we're trying to do in order to speed things up but also make it safer, because we've got so much disruption on the road, is limited night closures. Taupo are experiencing that at the moment, where we're closing State Highway 1 alongside Lake Taupo. This does two things. One, it's a much safer environment for the workers. You're not second guessing whether the person driving through is actually going to go 30 kilometres an hour, whether they're going to clip a cone and send a 8 kilo cone into your back, whether somebody's going to abuse you. So a much safer environment. It also means less stoppages. They just get on with it. They can rip up the whole road surface. They can make as much mess as they need to, and then they can put it all back and reopen the road the next day. So those limited note closures are really, really effective. They're also really disruptive, and we know that, especially where we don't have really good diversions. And there are a few examples where we've, 45-minute diversions in place, but that's the payoff for us is many weeks of disruption or a few night closures, job done, we move on. We are aware that that impacts your local roads, and so again our teams trying to work really, really closely with yourselves to say, hey, where we put these diversions in place, we know that having 50 max trucks driving on your local roads has an impact. What we try and do is we try and do a pre and a post condition survey, and then we put things right back to where they were beforehand. That's not always that easy. It's not always that easy to agree what the precondition looked like, but for the most part, I think we're pretty good at that and pretty sophisticated now about how that gets managed. So yeah, watch the space. You will see quite a lot of that night closure occurring, and into the next program, the 24-27 program as well. And that's it. Questions?
Thank you, David. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Jessica, at this stage?
No, David's done a fabulous job, but happy to help with any questions.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that, David. We acknowledge the tremendous amount of investment that has gone into our district in this up to here in the last 3 years. I'd just like to ask if the councillors have any questions for David. Yes, Councillor Kai Fong and then Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. Thank you, David. Just a question around the roundabout it by the airport and for Eastgate. I think it's a bit disheartening for us to hear that, it's kind of a low priority from an NZTA perspective, but from our perspective, both from a safety perspective and from a future development strategy in terms of opening up our commercial land, then that is a key priority for us. Is there an opportunity for Council to work with NZTA to perhaps look at other alternative solutions, even if Council were to provide some funding in conjunction with NZTA to actually bring that to fruition a lot quicker?
So 2 things. One, on a national and a regional viewpoint, the priority for a roundabout at that site is relatively low. And you'll appreciate we've got X amount of money and huge demands. That said, we understand the context of that intersection, and we understand the context of the development that's occurring, and we are working on that alternative solution, which looks like traffic lights, with yourselves. You've proposed that. You've even proposed to pay for it. The question we have to answer is that an appropriate, safe, etc. intervention in that state highway corridor, or is it not? And if it's not, what is, and what would the triggers be for us to make some other investment? If it is, or if some modifications to that environment are required to make it practical, then what do they look like? And that's what our planners are looking at the moment. And Stavros and I have had some conversations over the last few days, and I know Stavros has been quite frustrated with perhaps the way we've approached that up till now, where I've encouraged our planners to take the most pragmatic view they can in respect of that environment. At the end of the day, it is our state highway. We have to be able to say to our minister with a straight face, this makes sense as an intervention, whether we're paying for it or not. And so we're working through that at the moment. But yeah, we are looking at what those alternatives might be.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to having that discussion. And just one further question, Chair. Just in relation to State Highway 36, I see you said you were going to do some underslip repairs. However, through the future development strategy, we were looking at the development for Rotorua, which will be out on that Nongataha side of the town. And given NZTA's investment into State Highway 29 and the traffic that potentially will flow from Tauranga to Rotorua through State Highway 36, what future investment might be planned there, because the traffic is not just one way, which was kind of the feedback we got through the FDS submission process, but it's actually a key corridor for business and workers, both from Tauranga to Rotorua and back the other way.
Jess, do you want to tackle that one from an investment planning point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the reality is that there won't be investment in State Highway 36 of significance. We've been really clear for a long time that our strategy and our priority is investment in the eastern side, and that's why you've seen significant improvements along State Highway 30 and was part of the justification for the investment in the Tauranga Eastern Link originally. And we'll always be encouraging traffic to move on the eastern side of the lake, not through State Highway 36. The reason for that, there are a number of them. The primary one is that with the gorge in State Highway 36, any major upgrade of that is prohibitively expensive. So while obviously we'll keep maintaining it and we'll make small kind of improvements and safety improvements, you will not be, we're not planning to do any significant investment to upgrade State Highway 36. We will be encouraging traffic to use other routes around. We've been really clear, and you will have seen that in our FDS submission around the growth in Ngongataha and the challenges with that, because again, we've invested hugely in the eastern side to support growth and to support movement on that side.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Councillor Kaifong. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. My question is around, and concerns is around the entrance exit into the airport, and I would have thought that the roundabout would have been a bit more of a priority than has been that you've told us this morning. Weren't they going to be working in conjunction, because both of them have got they have real issues and concerns and safety and everything. People coming in and out of the airport also.
Yeah, look, in the long term, the logical solution is for one intersection that deals with all of those ingress and egress issues, and I don't think anybody disagrees that a roundabout makes sense in that context. The investment in a roundabout at the moment is not justified in terms of the traffic movements or the safety issues, and in terms of the priorities for the funding that we have, just doesn't stack up in the list, unfortunately. I mean, it would be great if we could build everything, but we can't. But yes, it makes sense to have, as I said, particularly in a State Highway 30, in the context of State Highway 30, but in the context of any significant state highway, not to have too many in and out. We don't want the situation we've got in some other places where you've got car yards and you've got mechanics and you've got everybody all have their own access onto the state highway, and it just turns into a shambles. So yes, it makes sense to consolidate those. It makes sense to consolidate them into one intersection. What the form of that intersection is the issue we've got to deal with at the moment, and when that occurs as well.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, and then Tapsell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies for my tardiness. Thank you for your report, gents. I noticed earlier in one of your earlier slides, you talked about the State Highway 5, Tarukina to Ngongataha, 15 million invested there, completed in 2022. So why did it take me 20 minutes to get from the Bunnings roundabout to Clayton Road and then just give up? Well, it was just not moving. Well, what's going on out there? At the roundabout, the big one.
The primary aim of that intersection was safety, and often there's a tension between safety and congestion. The answer to congestion is not always, in fact, infrequently, the investment in hard road infrastructure. It's investment in alternative modes of transport and moving people at different times, and in urban design, about where you develop and where people live and work. And I mean, it's one of the challenges we've got in most of our cities. It's particularly exaggerated in some. I mean, Tauranga's the best example possible of, you know, everyone lives on one side and works on the other. I suspect you're simply seeing that the symptom of that. People are living in one place and working in another, and they're all moving all at the same time. That intervention was a safety intervention, and it's safe.
No, what I was getting at is there was actually significant roadworks happening at that roundabout again. So what was that?
I actually don't know what the roundabout, what the roadworks are there. I know that there's been some issues further up with the median barriers, and we're having to replace and repair them, and that's a constant. I don't know if there's some surface issues, or I'm not aware. Jess, you're not aware of anything, are you, in terms of?
No, I might be able to find out in the next couple of minutes, but I don't know off the top of my head, sorry.
Okay, I was just interested when you said the project was completed, why we're still working.
Oh, and in 2022, not often, fortunately not often, but sometimes what we do have is, you know, a few years later there's some pavement challenges, or there's some, you know, things got laid down when it was cold. Instead of, ground conditions got to be more than 18 degrees for successful bitumen to be laid, and sometimes, you know, it gets pushed. It doesn't sit as well. It could be something that minor, or it could be something significant. If it was something significant, I'd probably know about it. But, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Secondary question. A number of us have already touched on the significance of the roundabout out in Tenai. We've already had a serious fatal accident on that area that may have been mitigated if we'd had a different transport, I guess you could say access and egress from that highway. If that was in place, that may not have happened. And then the other priority of ours is Amaho Streets. There was also an elderly gentleman who suffered a pretty serious accident last year. While those are safety issues, it also, as Deputy Mayor Kai Fong alluded to, that also is constricting to our future development strategy. If we go in and deal with the goals that we've established for ourselves and put in place the opportunity for growth, and yet our transport networks are not going alongside that growth, we are going to basically end up in a non-stop traffic jam, and that won't be good for anybody.
Is there any question there for Councillor Wilson?
The question is, how can we get that up the priority list, both of them?
It's less a question, well, how can you get it up the priority list? I don't think you can get it up the priority list, given the list that we have. We have a huge demand on the NLTP, and the State Highway Improvement Plan, as Jess will attest, we struggled to stop where we were told. We were told we were allowed X number of projects, and we could have put 3 times as many in quite comfortably. There simply isn't 3 times as much funding, and that's our reality. It is a challenge when we have a state highway network interacting with local urban environments and urban development. Always a challenge. And the goal, I think, for us as partners is to get the best outcome we can that meets both of our imperatives, because we have a different imperative from yourselves in terms of what we are providing in a state highway network versus what you're trying to provide. Sometimes, not always. Where that happens, and this is a really good example of where that happens, we have to sit down and have the mature conversation about what can an outcome look like. And I would hope to think that in the next few months we will do that. At this particular location, but it won't be the only one, as you've said. There's a constant play between those tensions. And look, it's never acceptable that somebody has a fatal accident or even a serious injury on our roads. Unfortunately, they're not perfect, and we have to make those priority decisions. But yeah, I like to think we work pretty well as partners. Every now and then we disagree, as in any good partnership. But it's how we work through that, and I think we've done pretty well here. I hope we continue to do pretty well, and we're well aware of what your pain points are in that corridor.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. And was there anything that you wanted to add there, Jess? I saw your hand. No?
Thank you. I was just going to answer the question around
Oh, we've lost.
seal. I was able to get the answer. Resealing the section of road, the old part of State Highway 5 up by the intersection, so what wasn't dealt with last time. But there is also some repair work happening on the new seal on the roundabout, so that's why you're seeing some work there. There were some patches which weren't performing as well, so we wanted to, while we're there, we're just touching those up to make sure that they're 100%.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Mayor Tapsell and then Councillor Wing.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have two questions, but we'll take them in parts. So the first question I have is, again, as you're seeing this new council, but you've come here before, and many other councils within the term since 2016 have shared with you the urgent need for investment by the airport. So when you say investment is not justified, I think we would appreciate some formal confirmation of this and the reasoning behind, because we are frustrated at the approach from NZTA on the proposed investment that Rotorua Lakes Council we're going to put into the Eastgate and SH30 intersection. So my question is, why can't we agree to an interim safety improvement at council's cost instead of having to wait for such a long time? Because if we look at that, it's a low cost effective solution to what is a very clear and present traffic risk. And we do have heavy traffic entering and exiting an uncontrolled intersection, which is a deep concern to all of us. And it will become even higher risk as we do have a proposed development of main freight out there to the east of Eastgate, and in due time we are wanting to progress the airport business park as well. So it's very difficult for us as a community to stomach that, to wait for potentially 20 years when we know that that development could rely on that investment, but that also we're willing to put that investment in because we can see the urgency. So why can't we agree to an interim safety measure at our cost?
So firstly, I want to acknowledge that you have said, look, we'll pay for it. And I think that's a really progressive approach, because fundamentally it's development that you're encouraging, that you want for your reasons, Katie Pai. I think that's a good approach. I don't think we disagree that something needs to be there. It's a question of what is the most appropriate intervention at that place. I suspect, and I've only come into this recently, that we've got hung up on the best solution is a roundabout, therefore we shall wait for a roundabout, as opposed to actually what can we do now that is enabling and accepted by everybody, temporary, whatever temporary means in that context. I can't give you an answer other than to say my commitment is that we will work on what that pragmatic solution looks like over the next couple of months with Stavros and his team, accepting that you absolutely have made it very, very clear what the priority is and how much of a priority it is for you.
Thank you. And just to sum that up before I move into my next question, we are trying to do all we can as a council. So if something else happens out there, you do understand we will have to hold NZTA accountable for not allowing us to put in an interim measure. So that's just, we are working very well as partners, but when we have clear priorities with business cases behind it and a key concern from the many users of that area that it is very dangerous, they do not feel safe, it is very difficult for us. So I appreciate you coming here to present to us in person, but again, this is an issue we've been trying to advocate for since 2016. So perhaps we'll follow up more formally later.
Look, and I acknowledge that, but I would also throw the counter back that those that allow the development to occur in the absence of clear safety investment being in place also need to take some accountability for that. So, it cuts both ways in terms of a partnership.
Yes, but you've just told us that you will not put that in until the development is completed. We'll carry on this discussion constructively later.
Thank you.
The second question that I had is just regarding the draft investment prioritisation methods. So the other corridor we have is between Waipa, State Highway 30 and Sala Street. And again, we're expecting that to be placed under heavy demand after Red Stag capacity enhancements and also the development of Picker Block, which is a really positive industrial development for us. So a question again around safety. Does NZTA believe that that section is safe to accommodate the increased forestry processing traffic that is very heavy, and also the recreational activity. So it is incredibly busy down there. Mountain biking has been hugely successful for us, but then also commercial industrial development in Peckablock. So you've got a trifecta of huge developments that are increasing the traffic. And so really the question is around, do we think that currently it is safe? And if not, when do we expect a detailed business case could progress so that, again, our economic development is not constrained?
Yeah, I might let Jess answer the wider part, the detailed part of that in terms of the investment. But one of the things I would say, just philosophically, we have to be very careful as NZTA we don't get into whack-a-mole. So every time a council comes and says, hey, we've got a development, we need you to change the state highway environment. We don't have the money to do that. We literally do not. We have to take a very stand back and look at a strategic investment program across the whole country for state highways. And that's the approach that we currently take. It's the approach we will be taking going forward into the next investment round. It's the approach that the prioritisation process encourages us to take, because otherwise we would literally just be doing a little bit here and a little bit there across the whole country. So it's that tension that I was talking about before, where you've got a set of priorities and we've got a set of priorities. Sometimes they don't connect. In the context of that location, yes, we're aware of the tension. We're aware of the potential for some safety issues, and as I understand, we're actually already engaged in a conversation about how to what the best solution might look like there, and also who pays, which is always the elephant in the room. But Jess, you might want to add from a programming point of view.
Yeah, look, I think, David, you've probably answered it well enough, but it is in the current program for a potential safety improvement, and Stavros has been fantastic at really proactively engaging with us about the need and the growth there and working with us on a solution, so it's well on our radar. But I think David is right that our priorities are shifting and safety funding is reducing, and we can't guarantee that this round there will be a contribution. We've also been very clear that because this is a growth-led matter, that both the developer and the council will need to be contributing into this, and our contribution would be a part of it, not the whole. So there is a lot happening on that particular intersection.
Thank you, Jess. Any further questions? Thank you, Mayor Tapsell. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just have one question now. Thank you both for being here today in person and through Zoom to present on this. It's been, I think, a long time coming for this council, the new council, to hear from Waka Kotahi around your works and future plans around our region. My one question now, because the others have been answered already, just again, honing in on the Nongataha village, so State Highway 36, I know. And thank you, Jess, for speaking about actually thank you both for speaking about how you want to focus the traffic from Tauranga, especially through the eastern, I guess, that corridor. However, in noting what you've just talked about around the development, Rotorua Lakes Council has identified the Nongataha village as an area of a future housing development area. And I guess in our roles as district leaders of our community, it is quite hard to bring our community along with us, especially those in, and I'm one of them, in the Nongataha and further north areas, when they're already seeing that bottleneck effect and that congestion happen in its current state right now, especially through that village. And so I know that, and thank you for touching on the proposed low cost, low risk improvements for the village and for the commuters cycling into Rotorua. But are you able to touch a little bit more on, I guess, any other works or what other improvements are happening within the village?
Other than those low cost, low risk investments, we have nothing planned. currently, nor in the 24-27, and probably not in the 27-30 NLTP.
Does that include the plan that was developed? It was a few years ago around whether or not a roundabout would be suitable within the middle of the village as well?
Jess, do you want to talk? Are you aware of that one?
We'll need to work through the details. I'm well aware of that plan, and the idea is that that would build on that, but there is some kind of refreshing that will need to be done with things that have moved on to figure out exactly what would be within it. But the focus of that investment, we'd had a lot of feedback around the access for pedestrians and the cyclists, and so it was looking a lot at that kind of pedestrian improvement across. What it wouldn't do is speed up movement through there, but it would look at safety improvements. But what we would do is work with you on exactly what the money would then be spent on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Councillor Wang. Councillor O'Brien and then Councillor Waru.
Thank you, Madam Chair and through the Chair. Thank you, David and Jess, for your presentation and time today. Could I just say I'm just a little bit concerned. The northbound traffic in particular at the top of Ferry Springs by Skyline Skyrides. We have an excellent State Highway 5 double laning both sides, excellent road, but then we cut down, as I say, for northbound traffic, we cut down to one single and a very particular, and then we asked them to either carry on to Nongataha or Hamilton West. I'm concerned with only one lane there. We've done such a great job of adding the State Highway 5 to then ask, this is why we end up with bottlenecks, and particularly, and I appreciate the growth you're helping us with on the east side, even at this pace, but there's substantial residential development on the western side, in Western Heights and Fordlands, for example, when KO get around to developing, we're going to end up with quite a bit more traffic. And if we have Peka on the junction of 5 and 30, southern side, I presume there'll be quite a bit of industrial traffic going through. I'm just very concerned that that area has somewhat been forgotten. And I just think that personally, and I appreciate all the work you're doing east side, that small stretch should be given some priority, because I think it's going to lead further. It's going to have big impacts on us. We've had a lot of growth on that road thanks to what you've done, but it's just an unfinished project, and I think it's a very poor piece of planning down the track that wasn't put 2 lanes, particularly for northbound, to separate between Nongataha and westbound Hamilton. Thank you.
Do you have any comments you want to make about that, David?
Oh, look, I think that's a really good demonstration of what the purpose of the Regional Land Transport Planning process and the Regional Transport Committee process is for, is literally for putting those things up and saying, hey, this is a priority for us. How do we put this in the list for investment? And here are the justifications for that investment, so that we can then take that through into the NLTP, into the National Land Transport Planning kind of conversation. Yeah, that is literally, that's the conversation we need to have through your delegate on the Transport Committee.
Thank you. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te chairman, o tira tātou katoa, Stavros, Morena. David, Jess, thank you for coming and giving your kōrero. I think the majority of my questions have been asked, to be honest, but I'm particularly interested in the part about the government policy statement. You mentioned you really don't have any sort of inkling of where that's going to sit. Should it become out that actually it comes out quite strong and our plans align to it, will there be some shift, or could there be some shift in terms of investment with your current in your current plans for Rotorua?
Yeah, so look, Ministry of Transport develop the GPS, the government policy statement, with the government, not us. So Transport Agency's job is then to implement. That said, we do have some input through the ministry into what goes into the GPS. We are asked for our opinion on various proposals, and we offer it up. And in particular, one of the things we offer up quite a bit is the pragmatism of actually delivering some of the policies. You know, will this actually make a difference? Is this actually going to be useful to people out there? So we do have an inkling about what's coming, but for obvious reasons, it's not our place to say what's coming or to you know, forecast that. If the GPS makes significant changes from the previous GPS, yes, we will have to go back and look at the State Highway Improvement Plan and review what our investments look like. I always try, when I talk about the way we fund, I talk about a graphic equaliser because, you know, that's my generation. But if you imagine we've got X amount of money and our job when we get the GPS is to say, okay, given that, we need to do more of that and less of that. You know, if we do more of that, one of those buttons has got to come down. So we need more bass, or we need less treble, or whatever it is. And that's the trick that we will have to do through the State Highway Improvement Plan and the Regional Transport Committees. So we will come back to the Regional Transport Committees and say, well, you know, the GPS has now said we must prioritise whatever that we weren't prioritising before, and the government don't want as much of this other investment. That looks like this. For your place, that probably means, you know, in the list of 100 things we were going to do, we can now do 50, and some of yours are in the top 50, but some of them are in the bottom 50, so they're not going to happen. Unless there's more context that we're missing that would shift them up. And that's the conversation we'll have to have relatively quickly. We're really aware that one of the issues that presents for you is that you're in the middle of your long-term plan process. You're going out to your community and saying, we want to rate you for X, Y, and Z. And some of that is transport spend. And then we're potentially going to come back to you and go, the 51% that we invest with you, that looks a bit different now. You might have to make some changes as well. We're really aware of that. So we're reflecting that back to the Ministry of Transport every chance we get, saying, get on with it, because it's actually going to be a real pain point for everybody if we don't get some progress really, really quickly.
Thank you, David. And just just a couple of more two more questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for that explanation. I'm really interested in that part of it too, in particular plans. And just wondering, you know, you've got the regional lands transport plans, and then you've got the government policy statement going to come out. You've got your own safety plans for the state highway plans. Sorry, I'm not too sure, but I do have experience working in the Kawanatanga, and how aligned are these plans to, say, the economic growth plan or things like that? Has there been any kōrero or any wānanga on that?
So that's exactly, or Jess is the planning expert, but that's exactly the process that we work with Ministry of Transport on, is trying to align those plans, and so that this sort of all of government view of what does the government want the country to look like, and where are their priorities, and how does transport feature as an enabler of that growth. And I mean, the issue with, you know, the conversation we've just been having about roundabouts and traffic lights is a classic example of how does transport operate as an enabler. With the limited funding we've got, what do we enable, and what are the most appropriate decisions? So yeah, Jess, do you want to give a better description of that than I? That'd be good. Or is that?
Kia ora. Yeah, the idea. So we take the feed-ins from the conversations with your teams, with your staff and with yourselves. So the plans should be aligned. Obviously that's not always perfect, but the idea, you know, what we put into our state highway investment proposal for here comes from talking with Stavros and his team and with you, and understanding what the broader context is that you hold, and trying to align those plans to enable that. And then, of course, we're then doing a balancing act against the priorities set for us by the Minister. So the intention is that they are well aligned, but we're balancing that against, I guess, the government priorities that come to us. But we don't, we sit there and we take things like a safety and the statistics we have, and then we overlay them with what are the regional aspirations and the regional priorities, because they are, you have the regional context, you have the people on the ground, you are the people walking in the supermarket and getting the feedback, so that should be what leads the conversation, not our view from our offices elsewhere.
Kia ora, Jess, and kia ora, David, thank you for your answers. Still thinking around in my how we could somehow find another pragmatic approach to get these things done. I still, you know, would like to see, you know, Rotorua got a bit of a hard time over the last 4 or 5 years. And, you know, there has been a lot of stuff we're trying to do to rebuild our reputation, rebuild our economy, rebuild everything. And I would have thought that we would have some kind of, I won't call it priority, but, you know, that we would be a bit louder than some other areas in the country. I note that in the list, there was a lot there, you know, Omokoroa, Tauranga, some more Kaimai, Tauranga, Tauriko, Tauranga, not picking on Tauranga at all, but, and we seem to be in the, I think you called it the smaller investment area, so trying to understand that, and I look forward to having a further conversation around it. Kia ora.
I think, importantly, just to context, the $100 million that has been spent in the last 3 years is not an insubstantial investment compared to many, many other similar sized or even bigger councils in the country. But I hear you, I hear your kōrero around the pain points.
Thank you, David, and thank you for acknowledging that. Thank you, councillors. It's been a good round of questions and feedback for Jess and for David. We've highlighted some of the things that are of concern to our community and a safety aspect, and also as an economic growth aspect as well, and helping us on our way to the pathway to recovering would be, you know, high on our priority list here in Rotorua. I'd just like to thank you for your time and your presentation. Thank you, Jess, for attending on Zoom, and yeah, wish you well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Look, can I just close by saying, look,
yes.
Jess and I are here to make sure that we understand your context, and at a national level, Waka Kotahi and ZTA understand your context. So it's really important to us that we have got these forums and these robust conversations and a great relationship with your team. So thank you for that, and yeah, look forward to more of it.
Thank you. And we do acknowledge the investment has been made so far, so we look forward to working with you again in the future. Thank you very much.
Kia ora.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Jess. I'll just give David time to get himself organised there.
Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate your time. And we'll move on to the staff reports now. On 7.1, that's page 13 of your agendas, councillors. This is Progress Report for Infrastructure and Environment Committee. Could I have a mover and a seconder that the report be received, please? Mayor Tapsell, Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. And thank you, Stavros. I'll leave you to overview report and highlight any matters you'd like to do, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, elected members, committee. I would note a couple of things. The progress report in general focuses on a whole range of activities that undertake maintenance and renewals. Renewals, I consider them to be maintenance activity for our existing services on our awarded networks. And I will take the report as read, and I'll be happy to respond to any specific questions you may have about that report. I would like to take a few minutes to note some important elements, especially those elements of our activities and our and operations that are aligned with the general context of our long-term plan, for which you have been busy and you are busy in constructing a community draft, consultation document. So in broad terms, 4 key areas, and I won't go in huge detail in each one of them, just to highlight in each one of the main activity areas some of the most important elements of our work. In terms of wastewater, we've got a wastewater treatment plant upgrade that it is progressing in line with our schedules. It is, as I noted earlier, we have encountered and we are working through some issues with regards to the ground contamination area there. As you all know, the location of the treatment plant, it was an old landfill, and in terms of doing excavations to create the foundation for the new upgrades, asbestos and other hazardous material has been identified, and working through to mitigate that. But the plan at the moment is progressing in terms of the schedule we have set for ourselves. And again, it is quite important to re-emphasize and remember that the wastewater treatment plant is really a key component of our delivering two main things. One is to accommodate current and anticipated future demand on it from our housing strategy, but also to effectively address our environmental objectives and our desire to mitigate any effects of our urban activities into our freshwater environment. So this is a significant investment, but also a very significant component in helping us moving forward to achieving our outcomes. Again, within the wastewater, we are progressing another one of the, on our objectives, so gradually giving effect to reticulation of hitherto unreticulated areas. The Tarawera reticulation scheme is progressing at this point in time, and stage one is, which is the mains and the pump stations, is going into a good, state of affairs. Probably you would have noted recently some communications and some social media notes about conversations we're having with the Rotorua Board of Control and some of their beneficiaries. We will continue to work with the Board of Control and whoever is involved into that area in order to find some common ground, understand any concerns they may have, and demonstrate how we're going to be able to address them. However, the approach we're taking at this point in time is that this council and the wider community and a whole range of stakeholders and landowners in that area have been engaged in this process for a number of years. The council has made a number of resolutions after considering the sanitary assessments of that area, and we're giving effect to all the resolutions we have made, to that effect. But as I said previously, we need to recognize that some people may have some concerns, and we are open to conversation, open to consider those issues and see if we can find ways to achieve some common ground onto that. Water services, in broad terms, again, there's no doubt that a lot of you would be noting national issues with regards to security to water supplies, with regards to the quality of potable water, especially addressing and meeting drinking water standards. So our focus at this point in time is to make sure that our sources of water supplies for now and in the future are secure for the current demands and for the anticipated demand of your housing and population growth, strategies you have roadmap for us. So at this early stage, our emphasis is to work with landowners and those parties and stakeholders who are having a significant interest in the sources of our water to ensure we have the appropriate resource consents at the appropriate quantity level and at the appropriate conservation level that will allow us to have certainty for the future, because without this sourcing of water, obviously, there is going to be some significant challenges to meet our growth and demands going forwards. And in parallel with that work in terms of securing our water supplies, also we are paying a special attention in the context of an aging network that contains a significant number of asbestos cement pipes that come, they have come or are at the end of their design lives, and to try to address significant areas of water loss or unaccounted for water, and establishing a water conservation or a water control or management plan to address most of the areas where we will achieve the best benefit for our investment. This is a long process, and again, because our network is of an age and a condition that requires some delicate approach, that needs to be in progress for some considerable time. But at this point in time, we've got sufficient water sources, we've got sufficient water supply, we're meeting our drinking water standards at the statutory level. Our unaccounted for water will continue to be reduced, and will continue to implement renewal programs that are focused on that particular objective. The third element at the gross level, at the high level, is stormwater management. In recent times, I think it was last week, my colleague John Paul have presented to you the somewhat modified approach to housing objectives under a report called Going for Growth, as you're aware. And when you look into that report, basically we anticipate some 10 to 12,000 new houses in the short to medium horizon for these districts. The reality is that for those houses and land development proposals to be consented and to be given legitimate statutory compliance, we need to demonstrate that we have in place the appropriate enabling infrastructure, especially with stormwater, to identify and mitigate flooding risks. So you're aware we've got two large programs of work on the go at the moment. We've got a central and western area, which are funded significantly by the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund. And we've got a gradual implementation stormwater improvement program in the eastern catchment. Between those two programs and between the holistic investment for stormwater improvement management, about 80% of that funding comes from either the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund or from the Crown Infrastructure Program. Now, this is a significant amount of money, somewhere in the region of $100 million, but you do need to be aware that these investments by the Crown do not come without terms and conditions. It's a bit like, understanding that they have an expectation of what and what's going to happen. Their focus is exclusively in demonstrating a clear linkage between enabling infrastructure investments, such as stormwater, and the achievement of housing objectives. They're not really interested in the infrastructure development. They're interested in how infrastructure development demonstrates housing objectives, achievement. So we're working through these areas, and one of the areas we will discuss with you in the near future is that by the end of February, we will be having conversations with the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund about the initial application for their funding support that addressed conceptual intervention areas for the central and the western sides. That program was done on the condition there will be further and ongoing detailed feasibility studies to validate or invalidate some of the initial concepts. Some of the areas have been improved, like, for example, the case of the Linden Park West, where we have managed to achieve a lot higher storage than initially anticipated. In some areas, the feasibility and geotechnical assessments indicated that we cannot deliver that. So we will be having conversations with the IAF by the end of February to say, well, we've got funding allocated in that particular project. We would like to be reallocated to some other project because the benefit cost of that is much higher. So we will report back to you onto that. But again, it's quite important for elected members to understand that funding does not come free of terms and conditions. We need to meet these conditions. The same way for the eastern area, where the Crown Infrastructure Plan have an expectation that for the contribution they made to our stormwater master plan, housing outcomes will be achieved. And again, there's a report coming to you in March with regards to a particular specific area in that, in that area. But we are making progress in all those areas. Waste management, as you're aware, key elements to note is that the Food and Organic and Green Waste proposal, or FOGO, as you called it, you have agreed for us to go to the procurement phase of it in mid last year. That procurement process is progressing. The expectation is that this committee will receive a report sometime in April about the outcomes of the procurement process. That report will identify the preferred supplier, but it will pause, will not move forward to recommend commencing a contract until your long-term plan consultation process had been completed in June this year. So you have a clear view as to how do you want to invest and when do you invest and what is the balance of your investment priorities going forward. So a report will come to you around April and we'll talk about that. Again, my progress report indicates that we are working with our colleagues in our property department to make sure that the facilities and the buildings on the TNI recovery facility has been identified to have high asbestos components. They are due for, they need to be, progressed to demolition. We're not entirely sure of the date of that yet, but myself and Thomas in the property department work in that direction. In the meantime, we focus attention onto continuing the service, and we found alternative ways to providing the service for waste collection, recycling collection without interruption. So that's been achieved. Now a report will come back to you about when the facilities will be demolished, what the impacts and effects, what the land can be used for, in the future. And that will be a report dedicated to the facility by the property department in the near future. And the rest of the report is with regards to our sport and recreation. Rob, Rob is here, can respond to any question you may have. But in the meantime, more than happy to take any questions you may have about our progress report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Stavros, very much for your report and the overview. Is there any questions from councillors? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stavros. Just have a few questions based on the report firstly, and then I'll one more after what you've just spoken about. Page 15, the CERF funded transport choices. Proposed bus stops, shelters on Amaho Street, government funding likely to be withdrawn. Wasn't that part of the rationale for this, was to try and spread the volume of passengers so that they're not all congregating at the Rotorua Street bus stop as part of our safety strategy?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Patterson. You are correct. The review of the public transport services in district, which is undertaken by the the regional council, had two components into that. One was paying for different routes and different frequency of service, but also it had a component of instigating the relocation and the refurbishment or re-establishment of public transport serving facilities like bus shelters and so on. The transport choices funding that was announced by the previous governments, I think identified that some $2 million were coming to us, both to be dedicated to public transport facilities and some pedestrian safety and cycling improvements. Unfortunately, after the elections, the Ministry of Transport had notified us that funding of $2 million is now on hold. There will be no funding until as my colleague David Spears identified, the government reviews and confirm his policy statement with regards to transport. We've done a lot of design work together with the regional council. We had some conversations with relevant parties and stakeholders. We also, especially in the Amaho side, as you're aware, if the funding comes of the revocation for State Highway 38, that will drive a lot of changes into the feel and functionality of that corridor there too. So the report basically says, on the basis that the advice we had from the Ministry of Transport and Work accordingly, we would not be doing any more work onto that until we get the funding. Otherwise, we have to fund it ourselves, which is not sustainable in the context of our funding assistance rate we get from the government.
Thank you for clarifying that. Page 21, the water supplies, the tanker filling site in Nongataha that's recently been completed. I drove past that quite a few times last week. Is that water potable?
Yes, it is.
Could that be a critical piece of infrastructure if we face a pretty serious civil defence emergency? Yes,
you're quite right. It's got a dual function, and again, the important thing for these water filling structures too is that, and as the report says, that many people used to use the fire hydrants to fill their needs, but of course, when you use the fire hydrants, you start introducing the risk element of water contamination. You draw down on your water pressure, you affect the residential and commercial areas, and the regulations now requires us to have them separate in areas so we have more control over it. But you're quite right, once we have these filling stations, they can form a dual purpose, as an emergency reservoir.
Fantastic, thank you. Couple more questions. The Tenai Recycling Centre, page 22, it's referred to need to relocate to another site in future. Have we got any ideas where that might be yet?
Now, haven't confirmed that yet, and as I said earlier, we have to have some discussions about what council wants to do with that land on T9. Again, as I said, because we're in the cusp of making some decisions about the FOCO, activity, it seems to us, in the meantime, we will continue to operate as an interim base from there because we have relocated operators into temporary facilities. But once a decision is made about the future operation of the FOCO, perhaps would be an appropriate time to ask a question, where do we need to consolidate these services somewhere else? Green waste, sorting and collection and recycling centers and so on. There are possibilities. We can continue to do at the landfill, for example. I think, we can find some alternative location, but at the moment we have not settled into a specific site.
Okay, thank you. And I do have one question which probably Rob would need to answer, but I'll ask the one from your report that you've just spoken on there. You mentioned the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund meeting that you're going to be having towards the end of the month. Will we get to have a heads up on what you're going to be talking to them about as alternative solutions for spending that money that may not have been effectively used when you've discovered that your initial ideas weren't going to work? Are you going to share that with us before you meet with them, or are you going to meet with them and then come back to us?
I think first we have to meet with them to understand the process of their thinking process about linking investment in the specific stormwater improvement programs to the potential yield of housing, and we need to explore what are the logistical and structural ways we need to reallocate funds in that area. We want, for example, to get some additional money from them because we have achieved better outcomes in Linden Park West. So we need to have answers to that. But you are elected members, and obviously, once we have some clarity about how they approach the matter, then the potential, let's say, diversification of that, of the projects, it needs to come back to you as part and parcel of our regular reporting, so you are comfortable that we are making the right decisions at the right locations.
Thank you. Just one quick one for Rob. The Sala Street trees.
Available to the contractors as well for if they can get any recovery, but I'll find out what is happening with those ones that you sought the land for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and welcome. Councillor Wada, you had a question?
Tēnā koe te tiamana. Kia ora, Stavros. Rob, nice to see you there. Just a couple of quick questions, actually. Stavros, you mentioned the, well, I call them hooks, on the funding. Could you just expand on that a little bit more and give us a little bit more, I suppose, of an example of what those hooks, or a few of those hooks may be?
Yes, Councillor Waro, I think sort of the emphasis on the initial objective of this funding and assistance we have received from the government has always been on enabling the mitigation of acute housing demands or shortage capacity we have in Rotorua. So that needs to be delineated against addressing some historical or legacy issues that, for one reason or another, the district has not been able to address. So when the Crown came to us and responded to our applications for funds, they said, we will make a contribution, but primarily we're looking into that contribution demonstrably achieving housing outcomes. So, and their contribution is a contribution. is not a, we will meet all your actual costs. They cap that contribution to a particular level, and there's an expectation that we will, and I use the 80-20, you know, the numbers might not be exactly that, but in rough terms, what we propose to do is fund at 80% by them, 20% by us, you know, in various locations. So they want to make sure that we actually, our district plan and housing developments are closely linked and aligned to the stormwater management improvements. If we cannot demonstrate that, it puts into question their rationale for their investment, because that was the catalyst for their investment. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm clear now on those particular hooks. Very important part, actually, because that enables us to do a whole lot of stuff or not. So, go to me, kia koe. Just one other quick question. It's about the FOGO. The service is all underway. As you know, I'm a fan of that, and nice to see that in the report. The tender, as per your report, closed last year in December. So what's the plan, you know, moving forward? When will those decisions be made, if I can ask?
Yeah, sure. I suggested, I said earlier, you have authorized us or instructed us to move to the next stage, which is the procurement phase. The procurement phase is in progress at the moment. We expect that an outcome of that procurement phase to be reported to you in April. And then we will hold on to it until you finish your long-term plan consultation, and then you will decide whether you go ahead. If you want to go ahead, when do you want to go ahead? And if you don't want to go ahead, then we'll decide from there. We'll not award a contract until you complete your long-term plan, so you can balance the range of demands you have on you and decide the timing for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Yeah, I kind of had a feeling it was about that, but I thought I'd ask anyway, because, you know, the kind of cuts out my next question, which was about when the public education stuff would start, but I guess we'll wait for April. Yep. So, atu tērā, tēnā kōrua. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Councillor O'Brien, then Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through the Chair. Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions based on the report, but also another one which I'll seek your guidance on afterwards, if that's okay. Thank you for your report, Stavros. Very comprehensive, informative as always. Could I just bring your attention back to our previous report back in November last year, and if I can quote you, significant impacts on the project. This is in regards to the Rotorua and Rotorua sewage scheme. Significant impacts on the project costs from high lake levels. At least 40 to 60% of all installations now require dewatering and sheep pole protection versus an earlier estimate of 10%, end quote. So could I just ask you, are you able to update us how that's affected from your understanding now with some period of fine weather, how has that impacted the project costs? Are you able to update us on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'll give you some high-level indicative numbers at this point in time. And the reason for that is that as part of your LTP, you will have to discuss with, colleagues, your colleagues here, the setting of the targeted rate for the Rotorua, which has been in progress since 2018, 2019, right now, and it's coming to the end of it. But in terms of the high lake levels, the East Rotorua contains somewhere in the region of 430 properties to be connected. Initially, the ground investigations indicate about 10% of that 40 or 50 properties will need some dewatering because of their proximity to the lake levels. Since early 2023, with an increase to late 2022-23 with the weather patterns and the lake levels, about 40 to 60% of those properties, which equates to about 250 properties, need dewatering to install the systems, and each one of them is roughly $7,000 to $10,000, depending where it is. So the rough indication of that activity is $1.5 million extra costs for that. The total cost of the project, as we have notified, is in our website and our communications, is estimated to be around $56 million of the total gross costs. There is a other parties' contribution to that of about $36 million. So it leaves a net cost of about $20 million to be distributed to the about 770 properties. And that's a decision you will make in the long-term plan when you're setting the target rate for that. In rough order, that's what the numbers look like.
Thank you for that very helpful answer. Could I also ask, just in regards, in that same part of the report, mana whenua and marae installations are low as per legal requirement, agreements and consents involving trustee contests and Maori Land Court decisions. Can I just ask, is that something, what I'm trying to ask is there something that we can do to bring those sort of consultations forward, or is that just a part of the process once a design framework has been set up for a particular project? Thank you.
Thank you. I think with regards to East Rotorua 82, the challenging matter there is not about the willingness of, let's say, of people to move forward to that. I will leave the marae decision, a separate issue. But when it comes to mana whenua land with multiple owners, the key constraints there is the legal complexities behind that, who the owners are, who gives consent for utilities and infrastructure installation onto, whenua Maori. Some of the times, or many times, information is not available, has to go to Maori court to identify who the inheritors and so on. It's just a legal process that chokes down the process, So I'm afraid we're doing everything we can. We have engaged a project manager which is dedicated to that, Wairangi, and that's her function is to bring together all the all these elements together. But it is a slow process, and unfortunately, there's not much you can do. The marae installation is a separate issue. There are two different views about the marae installation. There are some people who would like to have installations for the marae that will accommodate the very uneven and occasional peak demand for a marae, which costs a lot of money. And at the same time, that carries the risk that if the marae have this kind of high capacity systems, then they'll be converted into household equivalent units, and the marae communities will have to be facing somewhere in the region of $7,000 to $8,000 of annual sewage fee. So we have these conversations with the relevant parties, and we'll conclude it. But all these numbers, all these issues are encapsulated into what we believe the $56 million gross cost, is expected to be.
Thank you again for that very comprehensive answer. If I could just make the comment, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I just hope we as a council also remember that facilities provided like marae, that also acts as community hotspots, particularly in, say, a civil defence emergency. I just hope we remember that and remember our contribution to that at an appropriate time. Thank you for answering all my questions. My final one, Madam Chair, and I'm happy to take guidance from you, apologies, perhaps I should have brought this up in urgent, was just in regards around a protest that occurred, last week I think it was, in regards pipeline for the Tarawera scheme, but seemed to have effect on those around the Green Lake and Tiki Tapu, and I just wondered if perhaps either yourself or perhaps the interim CE, is there anything you would, in hindsight, say that we could have done better, or are we happy that the consultation we did was appropriate? Thank you.
I'll ask Stavros to address it first, and then maybe Gina may have some comments also.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Councillor O'Brien. I'll be very frank about it. My opinion. The Tarawera scheme has been reticulation scheme has been in consideration since 2017 at least. A comprehensive community steering group has been formed by on their own initiative that contain the ratepayers, the property owners, landowners, iwi, Rotorua Lakes Trust, a regional council ourselves for a number of years, which they arrived at a specific option recommendation. I think those members who claim to represent the Rotorua Board of Control, and their beneficiaries, they have not been involved into that. Their claim is incorrect, because you can go to the documentation and the same people who actually make that claim, you'll find their names on the documentation about arriving in that particular option. There is a second element which says that members and some beneficiaries of the board of that Rotorua area always have expressed an objection for a wastewater sewer pipe to pass near the lake. That is correct. However, council in making decisions is taking into consideration a whole range of community views, financial information, environmental information, legal information to arrive at a decision on making. So the wastewater pipe, the mains, is located on the road corridor that is owned and controlled by the council. And I would like to also note that out of 600 kilometers of wastewater pipes we've got around the district, all the way from Rotorua to Rotoiti East, Rotoiti West, Hamurana, Lake Rotorua, a lot of pipelines are located near or around lakes, because that's where the settlements and communities are. We have offered continuously to take engineering steps to minimize the risk of any, any pipe burst, that contain, the issues. We have made an offer to meet with some of the, of the people, of the members up there to explain what we're doing at the engineering level, and also to listen, if they want us to do additional matters to be considered. Haven't heard back from them at this point in time. It's an unfortunate element too, though, that the contractor on site and their members, who are also a large, in many cases, young Tiarua guys who feel a bit conflicted in having, some of their own members, been to some degree harassed in that respect. But we will continue to work with, with a group, with the board and the beneficiaries, and to move forwards. My view is that, as I said earlier, that this council has progressed gradually the implementation of that articulation scheme in every stage of the way we communicated, in every stage of the way you as selected members currently and previously consider all the relevant factors and made resolutions. It's impossible to reverse those decisions at this point in time, because what some people might say, well, we would never been happy about the piping on the public road near the lake, and that's correct. But so do a lot of people might say they are not happy about public infrastructure being anywhere. So those things need to be balanced in a pragmatic way, and we'll continue to work with them. But I don't anticipate that the project implementation would change in the way that you have resolved to progress.
Thank you, Stavros. And Gina doesn't need to add anything extra, she said. Did that conclude for you? Councillor Lee.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I'm just mindful we've passed 11 o'clock. Is it possible, because we could go on and on, if we could have a short break now and then return to this discussion?
I'm more than happy to do so if the rest of the councillors would like to do so. Yes, there's general nods around the room, so perhaps we'll take a break now and continue this conversation when we come back in 20 minutes at 25 to 12. Thank you very much. Welcome back, councillors. Thank you for that break. We were previously on the staff reports and we were having some questions. We'd just finished a question from Councillor O'Brien, thank you. And next we have Councillor Lee, some questions for Stavros on this report.
Well, I can't give you the answer at this point in time because not complete that draft speed management plan. All the consultation document procedures were undertaken last year. And of course, with the change of the government, we were advised that we don't have to produce a new, draft any speed changes as we see fit in our area, but the way statement to that effect.
Excellent. I'm sure the ratepayers will be happy. Page 23, welfare. A final local welfare committee meeting was held 27th of November. Could you tell me what that's about? It's not immediately obvious from reading the report.
Well, as you're aware, thank you, Councillor. As you're aware, part of my tasks are to be the accredited local civil defence controller.
Right.
So, if in the event where we need to activate our emergency operations centre in a major event because we cannot deal with it in business as usual, or we an alternative organisation we call the Emergency Operations Centre within this building to manage the civil defence. Within that civil defence structure, you've got operations, you have logistics, intelligence, finance, and a team that is dedicated to welfare provision. So that civil defence structure makes networks and contacts with communities, various government agencies that provide welfare in the event of civil defence. And in preparation, in getting ready to be able to do that, we maintain our connections and our systems and our logistics, and that's what the welfare team is. There's a dedicated group or network of people providing welfare to affected parties in a civil defence situation.
Excellent, thank you. That answers my question. Finally, the swimming pontoon at the Tarawera landing was installed. I went to Karaka a few weeks ago for a swim and noticed the pontoon, there's no pontoon there. There's not much parking at the Tarawera landing as compared to Karaka. Who made the decision to put a pontoon at the Tarawera landing?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. The Tarawera landing development was done with consultation with a wide range of people. The decision to put a pontoon there was basically based on use of the general area and a separation, or creating more of an incentive to separate the boating area from the swimming area. And a pontoon is a good way to get something for the kids to actually go and play on rather than jumping off jetties and things like that. It's changed a little bit at that site because of the alteration that has happened to the private jetty there. But we have a number of pontoons across the region that come and go depending on a little on condition and consents. So it was a great place during the consultation to have a discussion around a pontoon. There was an agreement from all parties to put one in that particular location and it went ahead.
Thank you, Rob.
Sorry, who made the decision? That was my question.
Well, it was made as the pontoon was part of the resource consent application, so it was a council decision. It was part of the lakes infrastructure upgrade that was proposed for that area. A pontoon was proposed, and through the consultation that was supported, so the decision to put the pontoon in was made.
Was the Tarawera Landing Cafe consulted on this?
The Tarawera Landing Cafe was consulted all the way through the engagement process for what was happening at the landing.
Are we likely to see a pontoon back at Okaraka where there's lots of parking?
We will go through a consultation process with that as well. I think the actual consent for the pontoon at Boys Beach had expired, so we'll need to go through that again.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, councillors? Councillor Kiriopua.
Thanks very much, through the Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Stavros. This question can be directed either at Stavros or Gina. You've mentioned that one of the issues with the Rotorua protest is that someone from iwi was consulted and is now voicing opposition. Given that this isn't the first time that RLC has experienced pushback from iwi about council decisions, often with questions around RLC consultation and engagement with iwi, and with the understanding that hapu and iwi don't have the resources for, the types of resources that council have around communication, around adequate consultation most of the time, can council processes be improved moving forward in terms of when you have questions from hapu and iwi around consultation, council's response outlining what consultation occurred, with whom, what understanding of the mandate was that was given, and how that consultation aligns with the obligations of council to resource and engage iwi in decision making, so that it's very clear to iwi that yes, council have done their job in terms of consultation and engagement adequately in this, and outlining how that has occurred so that we don't have these ongoing issues.
Thank you, Councillor Kiriopa.
Thank you, Councillor Kiriopa. I will respond to the best of my ability, and maybe Gina might be able to augment my response to that. You're absolutely right. It's not always easy to know the channels through which engagement and communication and consultation takes place, who the right people and what authorities they always have. And I think I will acknowledge that we continue to evolve and progress our completeness, of these processes. As I said earlier, when you look into the East Rotorua work we're doing at this point in time with regards to Mana Whenua, for example, it takes a long time to identify the right beneficiaries, the right stakeholders, and so on. And I'm not going to pretend that we've got everything totally under control, but we are going to do continue to improve that, those areas. And I'll give you a specific example. We are working at this point in time with the committee on NUI, which we will share a resource. We have our name, the person, and we will, that person who works for a council at this point in time, we will be spending 50% of their time working with the committee NUI to engage with Ngāti Whakāwē, very groups to improve precisely, that network of communications, so we can get a two-way traffic for us to be better informed and for those groups to be better informed, there too. As I said, in summary, I will acknowledge that we should and we could do better work in that respect, but at the same time, I also need to say that sometimes we don't get all the right information from people from the Mana Whenua and iwi groups as to who the appropriate people are to communicate with. So it's a two-way thing, but we need to continue to work in that direction. Gina?
Sorry, my question was, is there an opportunity for council process to improve so that when we have questions from iwi around what consultation took place, are council able to outline clearly what consultation took place, with whom, and how it meets the obligation of council under the Act and their to engage iwi and hapu in specifically decision making?
Yeah, if I can add to the comment already provided, I would say as a general policy, it will depend on the nature of the issue. I think in the current situation, we're reluctant to say too much because there's potential for people to perceive that as tit for tat, which is not our intention. So we've always got to be really careful when we do communicate about how it might be received or perceived by members of mana whenua, particularly if there's already a strong narrative on social media and things like that. And correcting the record isn't always helpful in terms of our relationships. We always try and think about, well, how can we provide information that's directed at the relationship we need to have? I would say in this particular case, there is ongoing communication with both the Border Control and with mana whenua for the particular area, Tūharangi Tribal Authority, for example, but also with Māori landowners in the area. We are engaging directly with them and have responded. We don't necessarily do that on social media though, and so, and that's because it's not always helpful to our relationship to do that. Sometimes it's better to be silent, even though we're getting a hammering, because to correct the record is not always, it has the potential to inflame things further.
You have a further question?
Yes, one final question, thanks. So, social media aside, with specific questions from the Roto Kākahi board, have they been made aware through email or face-to-face correspondence, however you're corresponding with them, exactly what consultation took place and what that looked like?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions and the answers. Thank you. And Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a point of clarification. Oh, sorry, I called you Your Worship again, didn't I? Apologies. Not quite there yet. Madam Chair. Madam Chair, apologies. Just a point of clarification. I have a question regarding an incident that happened at Hannah's Bay, Waikawa, and I'm not sure whether I should direct it here or to Infracorp, because the particular incident involved both council and them. So,
well, it might be helpful if Stavros answered that question.
I think Rob can elaborate more in detail. I presume you mean the incident where the person injured his foot, on one of the, of the facilities we got there. Look, can I be very clear here? Although Infracorp is mentioned into the activities they're taking, we are responsible.
Right.
Okay, so Rob can explain the, the process behind it. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. All our structures undergo inspections, and we have a contract with Infracorp to carry out those inspections. The incident at Hannah's Bay, there was a steel grating that basically had corroded over time and left a sharp surface that the person cut their foot on as they were retrieving their boat. That had been inspected. The work that had carried out had not picked up that particular hazard on there. The lake has been very high for a long period of time. It's also pretty dirty at the moment, and so, visibility-wise, again, without doing a shuffle search, so to speak, of the ramp, that might not have been found. That's quite understandable. Immediately after the incident, it was addressed. There was other areas found and pieces removed. We have contacted, I personally have contacted the person and had a discussion with them around that, at what happened. We've also subsequently done further work there to, do some metal detection around the ramp and make sure that there was nothing left behind. The lake level is now low. It was high. The lake is very dirty, so it's almost a by feel situation rather than a visual one. But there is a regime that's carried out with our structures to try and make sure that they're kept in as good condition as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for your questions, councillors. Thank you for your report. I appreciate your time. And you can move away from the table if you like, and we'll move on to our next item, councillors. That is 7.2, the CCO reporting of Infracorp. This is for information only. It's on page 28 of your agendas. I'd like to ask for a move and a seconder that the report, CCO reporting Infracore, be received. Councillor O'Brien and Councillor Wadu. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That is carried. Welcome today, John McRae and Regan Fraser. I understand that you have a PowerPoint presentation for us. I'll hand it over to you.
Kia ora, and welcome to 24, I guess. And looking at 24, it looks like it's going to be a pretty challenging year for all of us, I think, calling upon, high levels of energy. And of course, I think as a community, it'll require high levels of teamwork as we work through some of the challenges of 24 that we're faced with. I'd just like to say a big thanks to Regan, as someone who jumped into the role of CE, took on many of the challenges that, we're faced, not just at Infracore level, but across, some of the challenges of infrastructure right across New Zealand that's in front of us. I'd like to thank Regan for the commitment and energy that he's put into taking on the role. Obviously, as a board, we don't treat him as an interim CE, we treat him as our leader of the organisation, and thankful that he's getting the mahi done. We have challenges, there's no question about that. Most of the, as you'll see through Regan's report, which I'm going to hand over very soon, we're tracking well in terms of the quality of the work and the work done. We do have, the financial challenges that we've been talking about for some while that still sit there and we face. And without further ado, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Mōrena tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Still time. Hey, so just following the same format as we did the last report, thank you for your update, John. Just wanted to run through some key highlights for the quarter, the challenges that we're facing, and looking forward, what's going on. I've got a flash this time and done them click by click because I skipped a few last time. So pleasingly, a statement of intent did indicate that we'd deliver a similar level of services last year. We still continue to deliver higher than that. So I guess the biggest example was for me over the break. I was on call and I got very worried I wasn't being rung. So I went in to go through and the teams were just getting on and getting it done. The mowing plan, none of the grass is yellowed off yet, but pleasingly the team are managing to stay on top of it. It's not noiseless, but whenever we do get noise, it's typically private land which hasn't been mowed. So I'm very thankful for the team. There's been a lot of work behind the background to get there, and there've been a couple of exploding mowers. I'm just kidding, wasn't that dramatic, but mowers that ceased to proceed, but managing to keep on top of that. I'm just absolutely so proud of this one. In the tough times, we had a 60% annualised turnover, and that caused a lot of our issues. As I've mentioned, our staffing is back up, but we don't have as much training as we used to have. But that number's dropped now down to 23% annualised, so really substantial drop. I would caveat though, it's tough at the moment. There's noise out there. We do have an ongoing negotiation process with the union, which means that none of our team have yet been able to have their pay rise for the year, and it's getting, I know people are getting a little bit grumpy about it, but we are working through that. It's felt, this quarter's felt less like, oh gosh, what are we doing? This is all new, and learning a bit more to actually being able to work on it. And part of that's being able to address increasing some productivity. So the daily management system, which had been trialled, is now being rolled out across all teams. That's just every team, every morning, meets with their supervisor or manager. They talk about how yesterday went, what the plan is for today, were there any issues and anything needs to be elevated. So nothing that takes too long. But I guess the best example of why this works well is our two teams which were early adopters and picked this up, our stormwater team and our structures team. No coincidence, they're both the teams which are managing to deliver over and above, which is helping us with the revenue at the moment in terms of some extra recoverable works. We've got a high-level 3-year business plan. High-level means it's not pages and pages long, but it does have a whole heap of objectives that we want to achieve within the 3 years. And leading out of that, the first 90-day plan, which started January the 1st, So that's active, that has tasks on it instead of objectives, and we do talk about that frequently and measure it. Challenges. I guess I'd start off, all our same issues that were there last year are still here. We're working through the process as directed by Council back in May last year, I think it was. Currently behind budget by 241,000, and the actual loss for the year is 794. There were some assumptions made in the statement of intent that are now looking very unlikely to materialise, which affects the bottom line. The fleet is failing at a far greater rate than anticipated. You will have seen we do have a mix of stuff which has been sorted more recently, as well as 14-year-old trucks. So this impact is when transmissions blow out, when rust needs to be fixed to get a certificate of fitness. We had efficiency assumptions in there, and we just don't have the resource to be able to work on them at the speed assumed. It's become more apparent to me that Infracore, in an effort to meet budgets in the past, sometimes when we lose some of that resource, we haven't replaced it to save money, but that resource is required in order to work at speed on some of the efficiencies. Our contract works, we have assumed that we're able to deliver some contract works for Council, some of those larger CapEx projects. We've been unable to hire the people we need to do that. The main reason behind that is we're not anywhere near the market for our staff and wage rates at the moment. We did do a lot of extra work for Council last year during all that rain. That's when we went out and did extra work to keep the stormwater culverts clear, move stuff that's fallen down. Long-range weather forecast, even though the grass is not yet yellowed off, is remarkably different to last year. So it is unlikely that work is going to be available to be done by us. Excuse me. The offset to that, though, is that we do continue to deliver about $120,000 worth of recoverable works for Council that was not budgeted. And so that resource won't be sitting there doing nothing. We'll be using it to carry on doing that. And no stranger to anyone, inflation on expenses is far higher than budgeted. It probably doesn't need too much more of an explanation. So that's not painting a pretty picture for how we're going to hit the end of the year if we're already looking at this $800,000 loss currently against the budget, if these other budgeted assumptions are not going to happen. That's the doom and gloom. And I guess my point to you there is it's not fixed. The fix is going to be coming to you later this financial year, and that is still being worked on. Looking forward, so ongoing engagement with Council officers to proactively identify and reduce financial risks. So we've set ourselves between us a goal to arrest that decline and not make it any worse for the rest of the year. And that is ongoing. We should be able to update you at the next quarterly update. And this is the big fix for the future going forward. So how are we going on the new service level agreements? What does the future look like? So last time we talked about how officers from Infracore and Council were working together to create what do we want. That work has completed and ended up in a brief which a consultant would be able to provide an offer of service on. That proposal has been received just very recently and is currently in the process of going through a thorough evaluation by Council. I think it's worth talking to is we didn't want to just pick up what we've currently got and adjust some rates so that there's a bit more money. This is the chance to actually build it from the ground up again. So it's a very comprehensive process, and how that's going to work, it's going to address exactly what it is we want and make sure there is resource there in order to be able to do it. It's going to establish a detailed framework for reporting. This is going to head towards the next line, which is operational efficiencies. At the moment, we spend a lot of time talking to each other, which could be tidied up to make us all a little bit more efficient. And the reporting will help enable that because it'll be regular, it'll be exactly what's wanted in order to be able to measure has the right amount of work happened in the right period of time. It'll detail communication protocols and outline effective strategies for dispute resolution. So that's just literally how do our contract managers work together, and when there's an issue, if it can't be sorted there, how does it escalate to be able to be sorted rather than not dealt with. And it's going to introduce, and this is another thing asked by Council, clear prioritisation of our work streams, which will mean if and when Infracore needs to work within a constrained budget, there won't need to be a lot of work. All the work has been done to go, well, this is the least important work we do. This is what the impact will be if we decide to work within a smaller budget than required. And the biggest thing is we took a look from the outside at where we came from, how we got here, and we're going to build the new SLAs to address any of the previous issues that have happened, is that they don't happen in the same way they've happened before. An example of that, which is probably pretty visible, is we do have a lot, as I touched on before, aged fleet. And the reality is with a 14-year-old truck, it's been a problem for a number of years. It should be that that's flagging as an issue far earlier, both to the board as well as to council itself, that, hey, here's an upcoming issue. So we can address things a bit earlier on rather than a few years down the track when it's got a bit bigger than it needs to be. Just before I get to questions, I just wanted to summarise. So I'm just so proud of the team. They're really pulling out all the stop gaps to keep it running, and they're doing a great job. The place looks fantastic, and I've never worked at a place where you get so many compliments versus complaints. We're working really well with council officers to come back with that, what could a solution in the way forward go, and that's running well. And hopefully, May, June, there's all the information required to be able to assemble some thoughts around it and about what the way the future could look going forward. Thank you very much, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Regan. Thank you, John. Yes, there's been a significant amount of work been going on behind the scenes alongside your work at the organisation to understand clearly what's going on, but also those independent reports have been very helpful to help to design and deliver and propose some ways going forward. So we look forward to hearing a bit more about that in May, June or sooner. Thank you. Is there any questions, councillors? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Got it right that time. Thank you for your report, gents. Just a question. One of the slides you brought up before focused on the challenges that you're facing. And you pointed out that one of the biggest, I guess you could say, roadblocks to being able to deliver on contract work that you have with council is the ability to actually deliver it because of staffing shortages. So what is the actual number of vacancies that you have? What do you need to get to capacity?
Probably, excuse me, thank you for the question through the chair. Probably one of the largest pieces of work which would be easy for us to deliver would be renewals work for council. And so it's being able to grab somebody with the specific qualification. And some of these qualifications we have, an example would be, if I use the waters side, the potable, we'd need drain layers and level 4 qualified water techs, and some of those we have on our business as usual side for looking after the leaks and doing the inspections. We require more of that. Our biggest problem we have though is when that role's advertised is we're just so different to the market at the moment. So the solution going forward would be to bring everyone up to near market rates or market rates. But if you look at that across an organisation, that's a really big step. And so it needs to be addressed as part of the wider solution, I guess would be the answer there.
So what is it? You need another 20 staff, another 10? What's the number?
In order to be able to deliver that renewals work, ideally I'd have a team of 20 for contracts to be able to deliver a decent substantial amount, both on the open spaces. But our issue isn't so much the quantum. We can't attract one person at the moment, unfortunately.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair. Thank you both. Thanks, Regan. Thank you, John. John, could I ask, on behalf of the board, So quoting here, the fleet failing at a far greater rate than budgeted. Is that due to maintenance issues or are we talking replacement? And just in a broader sense, because can I just say that for an operation that depends so much on plant and equipment, that's a very worrying KPI for us not to be. And could you tell me moving forward, and I appreciate all the hard work Regan and you guys are doing, moving forward, what steps is the board taking to test to make sure that in future that depreciation and budgets in these areas, repairs and maintenance and replacement, is actually appropriate? Thank you.
Look, I think we need to go back to probably the top line, which is the one that concerns us all as directors. You know, if you're starting to post a 794K, that's showing that you don't have enough money in the tin to actually invest back into the organisation. It's been a challenge for us for some time. So the asset replacement, I think we mentioned that last time, has been an ongoing concern of ours, and it requires a degree of profitability within the organisation to put back into those assets to actually, you know, keep a good replacement policy in place. Regan touched on, you know, the change in contracting, which is the SLA process and the redesign of that. That's such an important piece of work. And as the chair said, you know, we've got 3 independent reports coming in, just giving us an idea of how efficient Infracore is and where the pricing and the pricing strategy should be in the future. So right now, in the recent past, we definitely haven't had enough funds to do the replacement of those assets, knowing that they do need replacing, and instead we've had to carry on and actually just use the equipment that we've got to the extent we can. Now that's not sustainable, and we know that as a board, and we know that, you know, as the management team, that has to be the policy to change those on a regular basis and keep good assets, modern assets that are going to do the job well and efficiently is so important to us. So as part of that SLA redesign, that funding and that proposal has to actually take account of that, as it would in the private sector. So there's been, you know, we've been treading water a little bit financially, surviving, if you like, and we are running very lean. Part of the other question that was raised was, you know, can we grow capability? And when you're sitting there as a board, say, looking at those sort of numbers, we don't have the financial resource to actually grow capability, even if it was in the marketplace. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. We need to actually make sure that we get the SLA agreement sorted so that we've got a sustainable future, and it enables us to do, you know, capability development, and enables us to do, you know, the replacement of the assets as and when they are due. So that's a long way of answering your question. Hopefully you've sort of got the gist of it.
Thank you for that. I suppose what I'm still concerned, and for me you haven't quite touched on, is I'm asking, like, so how's the board in future going to ensure that this is not a repeatable issue? Now, if you're putting in for contracts, etc. like that, I would assume that when you're putting in for these things, that these sorts of things you'd be factoring into your price. And I presume, obviously, moving forward, now that these have been identified, I just hope that a future council doesn't end up in the same boat in 3 years' time where we're talking over the same issues. So I suppose for me, I'd just make it, again, I'd like to be aware, and we'll move on, but I just want to know that the board is aware that my expectation would be that they're testing reports and financial figures given to them by the CE moving forward, by a future CE, to make sure that the objectives that this council sets are being tested and not just being ticked off or given the green light. So thank you. You've answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Was there any further comment on that?
I don't disagree with anything that's been asked by Councillor O'Brien. You know, as a board, we agree.
Thank you, and I think this work that's been going on for the last year or so will help to clarify a lot of these things that you're concerned about there, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Kiriopa, and then Councillor Waru.
Thank you very much for your presentation, through the Chair. I noticed driving down Ferry Springs Road last week that the middle berms, what they're called, the traffic islands were untidy, hadn't been mowed yet. I just wondered, is there any potential, is that Wakakotahi, as opposed to Lakes Council? Okay. All right, then my question's not relevant. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify that the question was regarding the roadside that was a state highway, is that right? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe te tia mana o tira. Tēnā kōrua, Regan. John, lovely to see you here today. Thank you for the report. I'll start off with a bit of positivity here, because when I look at the progress against statement of intent, it's actually looking pretty good. You know, there's a lot more green there than there was. A couple of grey boxes there, but that's hasn't started yet. But you've just said, Regan, is going to once you have those final discussions with the team here. But the one red one, as I said, always comes through is the financial, and I think Councillor O'Brien touched on that. It says the assumptions made in the budget. Oh, hang on, I'll just read it out. Currently tracking behind forecast by about 241,000. Assumptions made in the budget and articulated in the SOI are not materialising as phased. I understand that's not materialising as phased at the moment. Do you see that changing after these conversations have progressed with the SLAs and so on and so forth?
Thank you, and through the chair, yes, the whole point of it is the SLA resets. What do we want, how do we want it, and how does it sustainably proceed? But a lot of the issues we have now are just that the business doesn't have the ability to work on itself at speed. There are some cool things we're doing, but there's a lot of stuff we can't, and the fix for that is not something that you as an elected members could do right now. You need a full comprehensive overview of what that will be, and that's that work which is going to get done by the new SLAs. The best example there is those contract works. The phasing just literally means at what part of the year they were going to happen during the season, which is best to do works when it's not raining a whole heap like now, and we're not able to do it. And so they have a larger impact right now and had zero impact at the start of the year. If it's sort of going forward with the new SLAs, we would have the resource to be able to deliver.
So having the SLAs in place and perhaps some other long-term contracts provide stability for Infracore, therefore you could potentially take care of those maintenance issues and all that kind of thing moving forward if you had that stability.
Absolutely, yes. And I mean, a big part of the rewrite of the SLA is to address a lot of the stuff which I see would create efficiency. It's the two partners working together before the start of a financial year to go, this is what the works look like going forward. It's this at this time, that at that time. What can you do? What can you resource up for? So it's just working closer together, but removing the need for having somebody who knows everybody, i.e. me. It shouldn't matter who's sitting here or on the council side. This is a process that happens at this time when you sit down and go. And it's the same for, I guess to touch on the point before as well with the fleet, is that I should be explaining in a quarter if there's a red light because we're not renewing fleet as we should be. And I should be able to explain why. And if that's because we're sweating the asset, because there's an opportunity for that revenue to be better utilised, but I can demonstrate in year 4 and 5 we pick that up again, that's fine. But if I don't have an answer, you would see, you'd get early indications of that, and it wouldn't matter who is here. It's specified in the SLA how and when and what we're going to do and how we're going to communicate it.
Thank you, Regan. And also just start positive. Bit of a hard one, and now I want to get back on positive because I have spoken to quite a number of kaimahi there, and they do seem to be in a lot. The wairua is there, so I want to take my hat off for you, to you both for that, because at the end of the day, hea te mea nui tēnei ao, he tangata. So, yeah, e no te kōrero, kia ora.
Look, Councillor Waru, I'd just like to support your questioning that this SLA process is imperative for us to get right. There's absolutely no question about that. As a board and CEO, we're anxious to get this piece of work done and get it done properly, because it does have, obviously, wide-ranging impacts on us to be able to deliver now and into the future. So, you know, we've got all attention on that, and we've had really good engagement from the council management team. You know, they've been really supportive and proactive and working closely with Regan to get that piece of work done. So one part of me is really anxious about this. The other part of me is, you know, relieved that we've got the right management team on both sides of the fence actually making sure that this is a priority and this would be brought back to us as a board and you as a council to show that we've actually got the right formula going forward, because the current formula does not work. Simple as that.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Tēnā koe.
Thank you, Councillor Warren, for your comments. And just actually one additional thing that probably adds a little bit of complexity to this whole picture is the Three Waters reforms and where that fits into this process as well. So just to keep that in the back of your minds as well. Mayor Tapsell.
Well enough. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Look, can I also echo your chair's sentiments, Regan? We're very pleased. Your capability there gives us great confidence, and so thank you for reporting back. And it's pleasing for us to be able to clearly demonstrate to the community that issues like mowing are well looked after now. So thank you very much. I do have to ask though, just regarding the year-to-date deficit. Obviously, with the need to increase wages, we can accept that that is a reasonable argument given the cost of living and also that we value your many staff. However, we also know that this council is very financially constrained, and as the annual plan saw, the themes also going into the long-term plan is we are needing to really prioritise the funding that we have because it is incredibly limited. So what exactly is your plan regarding the deficit, and through the upgraded service level agreements, do we believe that Infracorp would be financially sustainable to be able to deal with those deficits yourself, or will you need to come to council for financial assistance? Just so that we're really clear now that when we talk about the deficits, where will that money be recuperated from to make sure that the fleets are up to standard, to make sure that the wages are attractive enough to even be able to recruit people. And I just ask that really simple, clear question now because of the financial constraints and the unlikelihood that this council would be able to come to the table with a large cheque or financial support when we are incredibly financially constrained ourselves, because that would mean that that would be funding not going into something else that is also of urgent need and priority.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, I guess the two parts I'd break that down into is if the SLAs are sorted and agreed, then Infracorp should not be coming back to council and asking for money anymore. That, however, won't deal with what's happening this year. So this year, that loss won't be addressed in any way by the SLA, which would start for next year, and we'll need a transition period as well. The work we're doing with council, it's commercial in nature, and I wouldn't feel comfortable talking in public about it, although we'll be happy to go into private to talk into it a bit more. But I guess the point to make again is Infracorp is doing everything it can do with what it's got, the way it currently does things at the moment. I do believe there are productivity gains to be had. There are in anything. But I guess when I was working on the Three Waters right at the start with the Scottish team, you know, they have a goal for their teams of a 1% efficiency every year, which they normally manage to hit. And you can do that by technology improvements, processes better. But we're looking at a quantum here, which is it's magnitudes. And so there is an issue, I think, which will be informed by council's look at, is Infracorp efficient? What does the market look like? How this is done at the moment? Where will enable you to make a decision? But I don't believe there's any easy, simple way where there's not going to be an impact if we want to continue doing things the way we want them done currently, at the moment, in the future.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions, councillors? Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the Chair, and thank you for your indulgence. John, could I just ask you to remind me, are there any vacancies on the board at the moment? And if so, how many? Thank you.
Yeah, we've actually got 2 vacancies at the moment. Yeah.
That appears to be all the questions, councillors. Thank you very much, Regan and John, for your presentation today and for answering all our questions and getting down to all the details. We appreciate your time and we look forward to working forward to those further conversations to get to the bottom of the SLAs and other work too. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to the next section of our agenda. I'd like to actually make a resolution or move it, that someone makes a resolution to move into public excluded. This is on page 37 of your agenda. There are 2 items for consideration in public excluded today. The first one is Infrastructure Environment Committee meeting confidential minutes, and the second is the Polynesian Spa admission charge increase. The reasons that we would propose going into public excluded include protecting information where the making available of the information would be likely unreasonably to prejudice the commercial position of the person who supplied or who is the subject of the information. I'd like to ask for a mover and a seconder to go into public excluded. Thank you, Councillor Wang and Councillor Maxwell. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.